And that, dear students, is why the mythological humans could not possibly exist, Professor Raxel announced with a satisfied flutter of his sensory tendrils. The lecture hall of the Grand Galactic Academy hummed with the gentle vibrations of 300 students taking notes on their quantum tablets. He gestured to the holographic display behind him, showing various impossible creatures from ancient texts. Look at these absurd descriptions. A bipedal species with only 2 eyes, no backup organs, and exposed skin. The very idea is preposterous. They would never survive basic environmental challenges, let alone achieve space travel. The students chittered in agreement. Many were taking advanced mythological species studies because it was an easy credit. Professor Raxel was famous for his entertaining lectures about obviously fictional creatures from the galaxy's distant past. Now let's examine Exhibit 394. Raxel continued, pulling up an ancient image. This supposedly shows a human military vessel. Notice the completely inefficient design. No gravitational stabilizers, no quantum shielding, and most ridiculously, they supposedly used chemical combustion for propulsion. The lecture hall erupted in laughter. A young Zentorian in the front row actually fell out of their hover seat from giggling too hard. Yes, quite amusing, Raxel beamed, his skin shifting to a pleased shade of mauve. The ancient texts claim these humans built vast empires and fought great wars. But clearly these are simply cautionary tales created by our ancestors, much like the stories of the Grand Space Kraken or the planet-eating nebula whale. He switched to the next slide, showing what appeared to be a human eating something called a hot dog, all in their dietary habits. Consuming processed organic matter through a single orifice, without even a proper digestive tentacle. The writer of this particular text must have been consuming too much fermented stellar nectar. More laughter filled the hall. Professor Raxel was about to launch into his favorite part, debunking the ridiculous human concept of dancing, when a student burst through the lecture hall doors. The young Arxian scales were practically white with panic, their auxiliary breathing sacs inflating rapidly. Professor Raxel, the student gasped, waving a data pad frantically. You need to see this. Everyone needs to see this. Now see here, young scholar Raxel said sternly, his tendrils curling in disapproval. We have strict protocols about interrupting lectures, unless the galaxy is ending. But Professor, look, the student connected their pad to the main display system. The hologram flickered, and suddenly the lecture hall was filled with a real-time feed from the Outer System Defense Network. The image showed tens of thousands of ships emerging from what appeared to be crude faster-than-light ruptures in space. The ships were sleek, angular, and completely unlike anything in the known galaxy. And there, clear as stellar day on the side of the largest vessel, was an impossible symbol that made Professor Raxel's primary heart stop and his backup heart kick into overdrive. The symbol matched perfectly with the fictional human writing system he'd been mocking just moments before. Oh, Professor Raxel said weakly, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray. It appears we may need to revise next semester's curriculum. The lecture hall had gone completely silent. 300 students stared at the impossible fleet with a mixture of awe and terror. And then, to make matters worse, every communication device in the room began buzzing with the same priority 1 message. Attention all citizens of the Galactic Federation. First contact protocols are now in effect. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Professor Raxel looked back at his lecture slides, then at the fleet, then at his stunned students. Finally, he did what any respected academic would do in this situation. He fainted. The Grand Galactic Council's emergency chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from 57 species crammed into the circular room, creating a rainbow of panic as their various biological stress responses triggered simultaneously. Order. We must have order, Supreme Chancellor Nexari shouted, pounding her ceremonial gravity hammer against the floating podium. Her bioluminescent spots were flashing red with frustration. Will everyone please stop molting their stress scales? The cleaning drones can't keep up. Admiral Blixma burst into the chamber, his tentacles tangled in what appeared to be hastily donned ceremonial armor. Chancellor, the human fleet has now appeared at 37 different system edges simultaneously. They're just sitting there menacingly. menacingly sitting there? That's what they're doing, asked Defense Minister Prohl, all 8 of his eyes blinking rapidly. No demands, no threats, no mysterious probes. Well, Blixma shuffled uncomfortably. They did send one message to every communication device in the galaxy, simultaneously, in all our languages, even the extinct ones. What did it say? The chamber fell silent, every species leaning forward with various appendages raised in anticipation. Hello, Blixma paused. That's it, just hello. The chamber erupted again. A Quaxian diplomat fainted, their anti-gravity stabilizers failing and sending them floating to the ceiling. 3 meeplings began stress harmonizing, their high-pitched song shattering several crystal data tablets. But that's impossible, shouted General Yara 6, her war frills fully extended. Our most advanced ships take 3 days to calculate translations. They did it instantly, across the entire galaxy. That's not even the worst part, Blixma continued, pulling up a holographic display. We've been analyzing their ships. They're using technologies we considered theoretical, some we considered impossible, and some he swallowed hard, some we thought were just badly written science fiction. The display showed close-up scans of the human vessels. They were utilizing principles that the galaxy's best scientists had dismissed as absurd. Chemical rockets working alongside quantum drives, artificial gravity generated by rotating sections, and, most impossibly, cup holders. Lots and lots of cup holders. We've mobilized the Defense Fleet, General Yara 6 reported, trying to maintain some dignity despite her trembling war frills. Though I must point out that our most advanced tactical simulations were based on the assumption that humans were myths. We have approximately 18 million battle plans, and none of them account for this scenario. What about the restricted archives? Suggested a quiet voice. All eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs turned to Professor Raxel, who had just regained consciousness and been brought to the chamber. The ones that were sealed 10,000 years ago? The ones we all dismissed as fairy tales. Chancellor Nexari's spots shifted to a deep purple of concern. Those are sealed for a reason, Professor. They contain nothing but old stories. Myths about ancient wars, about a species so terrifying that the galaxy united against them. Stories about humans, Raxel finished quietly. Before anyone could respond, every screen in the chamber lit up with a new message. The humans were broadcasting again. Hey there. Sorry about the dramatic entrance. We would have called ahead, but we wanted to surprise you. It's been 10,000 years, and honestly, we got a bit bored waiting. Anyone up for coffee? We brought enough for everyone. The message was accompanied by an image that made several council members faint. It showed one of the supposedly mythical humans sitting in what appeared to be a ship's command chair, feet up on a console, drinking from something labeled World's Okayest Space Captain mug. Chancellor Admiral Blixma said weakly, I believe we may need to revise our first contact protocols. None of them account for Casual Friday. In the ensuing chaos, no one noticed Professor Raxel quietly pulling up the ancient texts on his datapad. No one saw him comparing the mythical warnings about human behavior with the current situation. And no one heard him muttering to himself, "Oh my, they haven't changed a bit." The chamber's AI assistant chose that moment to helpfully announce attention. The human fleet has begun deploying smaller vessels. Initial scans indicate they appear to be food trucks. Chancellor Nexari looked at the scene of panicking officials, then at the image of the casual human captain, and finally at the approaching fleet of food trucks. She did the only reasonable thing a leader could do in this situation. She ordered a recess for lunch. Welcome to Project Mythbusters, announced Research Director Kenna, her phosphorescent head tendrils glowing with barely contained excitement. You've been chosen because you're the best, the brightest, and most importantly, the least likely to be missed if this all goes horribly wrong. The assembled team exchanged nervous glances. They stood in a formerly abandoned research facility deep beneath the galactic archives, surrounded by dust-covered artifacts and ancient data crystals. The team consisted of Professor Raxel, military analyst Jax 9, ancient technology specialist Nova Bright, cultural expert Lumi, and its support technician Bob, who had only come down to fix the coffee machine, but got drafted into the project when no one else would volunteer. Our mission, Kenna continued, is to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. The council wants answers about these humans, and they want them before the food truck situation gets any more out of hand. What's the current status? Jax-9 asked, his cybernetic eye whirring as it took notes. 17 species have already declared the humans' grilled cheese sandwiches their new official religion, Kenna sighed. And don't even get me started on what happened when they introduced something called pizza. Professor Raxel stepped forward, clutching his datapad. I've been reviewing the restricted archives. The actual restricted archives, not the public ones. The ones hidden behind the other restricted archives. The really, really restricted ones. How many levels of restriction are there? Bob asked, still trying to fix the coffee machine. That's restricted, everyone else answered simultaneously. According to these records, Raxel continued, humans weren't just real. They were everywhere. And they were well. Look at this footage from 10,000 years ago. He projected a hologram showing an ancient space battle. The assembled team watched in horror as a small human vessel, badly damaged, was cornered by 3 enemy warships. Conventional tactics would suggest surrender, Jax-9 commented. Keep watching, Raxel said. The human ship suddenly accelerated directly at the enemy fleet. A transmission from the human captain played, "Hey, why all? Watch this." What followed made Nova Bright drop her toolkit, Lumi start stress-shedding luminescent scales, and Bob finally fixed the coffee machine out of sheer shock. Did they just? Kenna started. Yes, Raxel nodded. They won by doing something so monumentally ridiculous that it wrapped around from stupid to brilliant. The archives are full of incidents like this. But why were these records hidden? Lumi asked, still glowing from stress. Nova Bright, who had been scanning the oldest data crystals, suddenly shouted, "Found something. It's a treaty. The Great Species Accord of Omai." The team gathered around as she read, in recognition of their unique ability to turn any situation into an improbable victory, and their concerning habit of adopting every species they meet as, quote, precious space babies that must be protected at all costs. The humans have agreed to withdraw from the galaxy. They withdrew, Bob asked, handing out fresh coffee. Why? To give us space to grow up, Raxel realized, his skin turning pale. They were like space parents sending their kids to college, suggested Jax-9. Exactly. And now they're back for Parents' Weekend. Kenna started pacing, her head tendrils flickering through various colors. That explains so much. The instant translations, the casual approach, the food trucks. They've been watching us this whole time. Every myth, every legend about impossible beings doing impossible things was probably just Tuesday for them. Nova Bright finished. The team spent the next several hours reviewing ancient records, each revelation more startling than the last. They discovered humans had a habit of naming their warships things like Cuddles and Bodie McBoatface. They found records of humans keeping dangerous predators as pets. Because they were cute, there was even documentation of humans challenging ancient cosmic horrors to dance contests. Look at these behavioral analyses, Lumi said, projecting more data. Our ancestors tried so hard to understand them, but they kept reaching the wrong conclusions. The projections showed a series of hilarious misinterpretations. Humans consume toxic substances for enjoyment. Conclusion, possible death cult. Humans intentionally scare themselves for entertainment. Conclusion, masochistic tendencies. Humans attach googly eyes to cleaning robots. Conclusion, primitive worship of artificial intelligence. Humans respond to most threats with what they call dad jokes. Conclusion, psychological warfare tactics. But here's what I don't understand, Jax-9 said, reviewing military records. If they're so advanced, why use such primitive technology alongside their advanced tech? Why have chemical rockets and quantum drives? Because they can, Bob answered, surprising everyone. He'd found an ancient maintenance manual. Look at this. Humans will literally use anything that works. They don't care if it's elegant or makes sense. If it works, they'll use it. If it doesn't work, they'll make it work. Usually by hitting it really hard and saying there we go when it starts working again. A priority alert interrupted their research. The human fleet was moving again. But instead of advancing toward population centers or military installations, they appeared to be setting up something called a tailgate party in the Carina Nebula. Director Nova Bright said slowly, "I think I know why they chose now to return." She projected a graph showing galactic civilization's technological progress over the past 10,000 years. We've just reached the point where we can understand and appreciate most of their technology. We're not babies anymore, we're teenagers. And like any good parents, Raxel added, they've shown up just when we think we know everything. The facility's speakers suddenly crackled to life with another galaxy-wide broadcast from the humans. Hope everyone's enjoyed the appetizers. Who's ready for the main course? We brought barbecue. Kenna looked at her team, then at the mountain of evidence showing just how hilariously wrong they'd been about everything. "Well," she said finally, "I suggest we accept their dinner invitation. Any objections?" Just one Bob raised a tentacle. "Should we tell the council that humans apparently consider barbecue a valid diplomatic tool?" "Let's save that revelation for the second date," Kenna decided wisely. The Grand Galactic Council had spared no expense preparing for the first official diplomatic meeting with humanity. They'd converted their largest chamber into what their research suggested was a traditional human meeting space, complete with something called a water cooler and motivational posters that said things like "hang in there," with pictures of small furry creatures clinging to vegetation. Ambassador Lauren Parker of Earth stepped into the chamber, took one look around, and burst into uncontrollable laughter. "Is something wrong?" Chancellor Nexari asked, her spots shifting to concerned purple. "We studied your corporate culture extensively." No, it's perfect," Ambassador Parker wheezed, wiping tears from her eyes. "It's just you've recreated a perfect 1990s office space. Complete with, is that a bowl of mint lifesavers?" The ancient texts spoke highly of these ring-shaped sustenance tablets, Professor Raxel explained proudly. "We replicated them according to the sacred specifications." Lauren picked up one of the mints, smiled, and popped it in her mouth. The assembled alien delegation watched in fascination as she consumed what they had assumed was a holy relic. "Please, everyone, sit down," Chancellor Nexari gestured to the carefully arranged furniture. "We have much to discuss." What followed was perhaps the most chaotic diplomatic meeting in galactic history. First came the seating arrangement disaster. The galactic delegation had arranged themselves by number of appendages, as was traditional. The human delegation sat randomly, apparently choosing seats based on good vibes and where the snacks were closest. Then came the refreshments crisis. The aliens had prepared everything according to their understanding of human dietary needs, including what they believed was coffee, but was actually a concerning mixture of various energy-rich compounds that could probably power a small starship. "Maybe we should skip the drinks," suggested Human Fleet Commander Nathan Stone, eyeing the gently glowing liquid, "though I know a few fighter pilots who'd probably love that stuff." The real problems began when they started discussing the past 10,000 years. "We have to ask," Admiral Blixma said, trying to sound diplomatic, "why did you leave us all those warnings about your species if you were planning to return peacefully?" "Warnings?" Lauren looked confused. "We left historical records and tourist brochures." The room fell silent. "Tourist brochures?" Professor Raxel's voice cracked. "Well, yeah, all those stories about humans doing crazy things? Those were like travel reviews. You know, like had a great time fighting the cosmic horror in the Crab Nebula. Terrible service, but the tentacles were actually pretty friendly once we taught them to dance. 3 stars. Would battle again." The alien delegation stared in horror as they realized that what they'd interpreted as dire warnings about human aggression were actually just vacation photos and Yelp reviews. But the Great Battle of the Horsehead Nebula, General Yara 6 protested. "Our records show your fleet facing impossible odds." "Oh," that Commander Stone grinned. "That was Steve's bachelor party. Got a bit out of hand. Sorry about the nebula, by the way. We did fix its shape afterward." "The incident at Proxima Centauri?" asked Jax9 weakly. Flash Mob Lauren shrugged. "We were really into those back then." The meeting deteriorated further when they reached current events. About the food trucks, Chancellor Nexari began carefully. Pretty good, right? Lauren beamed. Though I have to say, watching a hexapodian try to eat a hot dog with 6 hands was both amazing and terrifying. 17 species have converted their entire religions to worship something called a Taco Tuesday. Yeah, that tracks. The situation reached its peak when Nova Bright, trying to be helpful, presented her research on human customs. She had created a comprehensive guide to human behavior, which turned out to be hilariously wrong in every possible way. No, we don't actually power our ships with the sound of children's laughter, Commander Stone explained, trying not to choke on his actually safe to drink water. Though I'm definitely suggesting that at the next engineering meeting. And humans don't actually have to dance to maintain their life force, Nova asked, frantically correcting her notes. Only at weddings, Lauren said with a completely straight face. The meeting's defining moment came when Bob the EAT technician, who wasn't even supposed to be there, accidentally created an interstellar incident by offering the humans something from the snack table. Would you like some synthetic protein cubes, he asked innocently. They're nutritionally complete. The human delegation stared at the gray, perfectly cubic snacks in horror. Are those space Lunchables? Commander Stone whispered. They're our attempt to recreate your emergency rations, Professor Raxel explained proudly. Lauren picked up one of the cubes, examined it, and then did something that would go down in galactic history. She dumped it in the possibly radioactive coffee substitute. You know what she said, taking a bite. With enough caffeine, anything's edible. This is actually better than the food in my college dorm. That single act of diplomatic bravery did more for human-alien relations than any official treaty could have. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans not only survived their terrible attempts at Earth cuisine, but actually seemed to enjoy the challenge of eating it. Permission to speak freely, Bob asked, still wondering how he'd ended up in this situation. Granted, everyone said simultaneously. Are all humans this adaptable? Oh no, Lauren smiled. Some of us are really weird. The meeting concluded with the humans suggesting they order pizza, the aliens trying to figure out if that was a diplomatic code word, and Professor Raxel quietly updating his lecture notes to include a new section titled Humans Everything We Know Is Wrong, and that's probably for the best. As they left the chamber, Chancellor Nixari turned to Lauren. There's just one thing I have to know. Those food trucks, was that really necessary? Chancellor Lauren said solemnly, in all of human history, we have never once made first contact without bringing snacks. It's like a whole thing with us. You should see what we packed for dessert. The ancient archives beneath the Galactic Library had never seen so much activity. Teams of researchers scurried through the dusty corridors, their various appendages full of newly discovered records. At the center of this academic storm, Professor Raxel and Research Director Kenna stood before a massive holographic display, watching as 10,000 years of history rewrote itself before their eyes. Play that last recording again, Kenna requested, her head tendrils flickering with excitement. The hologram showed a scene from the final days before humanity's departure. A human representative stood before the ancient Galactic Council, but unlike the formal recordings they'd found earlier, this was from a security feed. It showed what happened after the official meeting. Look, it's really quite simple, the human was saying, munching on something called a candy bar. You folks need room to grow. We're like that uncle who crashes on your couch and ends up staying way too long. Sometimes the best thing to do is step back and let the kids figure things out for themselves. But what about the threats? Asked an ancient council member. The great destroyers? The cosmic horrors? Oh, we'll keep an eye on those, the human said casually. Think of us as your species' designated driver. We'll hang back, make sure nobody gets eaten by interdimensional predators, but otherwise, let you do your thing. Nova Bright burst into the room, waving a data crystal. You need to see this. We found their observation logs. The hologram shifted to show thousands of entries. The assembled team watched in amazement as humanity's true role in galactic history became clear. Entry 2749 noticed the Zentorians were having trouble with their first FTL drive. Left detailed instructions disguised as ancient cave paintings. Watching them try to decode them is hilarious. They're so close to figuring out they're reading it upside down. Entry 4892 had to redirect that rogue asteroid heading for the Blixoid colony. Made it look like a natural gravitational phenomenon. They named it the Great Miracle of the Dancing Moon. Close enough. Entry 7123. The Quaxians finally invented pizza on their own. Took them long enough. Leaving congratulatory message encoded in cheese pattern. They were watching us the whole time, Professor Raxel whispered. Not as overlords or guardians, but as proud parents, Bob finished, having once again ended up involved in historical discoveries while trying to fix the archive's communication system. Look at this entry. Entry 9958. The different species are starting to form real connections. They've established the Galactic Federation, created stable trade routes, and even started their own version of the internet. Though they're primarily using it for sharing pictures of their pets. Mission accomplished. Jax 9, who had been analyzing military records, suddenly started laughing. You won't believe this. Remember all those unexplained phenomena that saved various civilizations from disaster? The mysterious shield that appeared around Proxima Beta during the solar flare? The convenient wormhole that helped the Arcturian refugee fleet escape. Don't tell me Kenna started. All humans. They turned galactic protection into some kind of extreme sport. They even had a points system. The team dug deeper into the archives, and the truth became even more amusing. Humanity hadn't just been watching, they'd been actively cheering for every species' advancement while trying not to interfere too obviously. They found records of human scientists having heated debates about whether leaving advanced technology blueprints in the form of crop circles was too subtle or not subtle enough. There were logs of humans disguising themselves as various mythological creatures just to nudge civilizations in the right direction. Here's the real reason they came back, Nova Bright announced, pulling up another file. It's the Great Species Accord. The actual one, not the public version. The document was surprisingly simple. When the galaxy's species achieved the following milestones, it's party time. 1. Stable multi-species government. 2. Peaceful resolution of major conflicts. 3. Development of pizza without outside help. 4. At least 3 species figuring out that black holes can be used for data storage. 5. Someone finally realizing that space squids are actually pretty chill once you get to know them. They made a checklist, Bob asked incredulously. A checklist we apparently completed last Tuesday, Nova confirmed, when the Arcturian-Zentaurian peace treaty was signed with a pizza party, and someone finally invited the space squids. Just then, Ambassador Lauren Parker walked in, carrying what appeared to be a large box of donuts. She took one look at the displays and grinned. Ah, you found the home videos. These are classified historical records of the highest security level, Raxel protested. Yeah, like I said, home videos. Want to see what your species looked like as teenagers. The awkward face was adorable. Before anyone could respond, every screen in the archive lit up with a new message from the human fleet. Congratulations on your graduation from Galactic High School. In recognition of this achievement, we proudly present your species with their very own membership card to the Big Kids Club of the Universe. Benefits include unlimited access to the Cosmic Sandbox, your own set of keys to the Galactic Car, and most importantly, the Wi-Fi password to reality. Is this a joke? Kenna asked Lauren. Only mostly, the ambassador replied, offering the box of donuts. But seriously, you've all grown up so much. You should see the photos in our wallets. We've been bragging about you to the Andromeda crowd for centuries. Professor Raxel looked at the donuts, then at the records of humanity's bizarre but endearing guardianship, and finally at the proud grin on Lauren's face. We thought you were myths, he said. Then we thought you were gods, but you were just neighbors who moved away to let us grow up. With occasional visits to make sure you weren't throwing too many wild parties or accidentally summoning elder gods, Lauren winked. Speaking of which, who taught the Blixoids how to do keg stands? Because that was not in the approved curriculum. The truth about humanity turned out to be neither as terrifying as the myths suggested nor as simple as the history books claimed. They were simply a species that had looked at the galaxy, decided everyone in it needed both protection and space to grow, and turned the whole thing into what they called a working vacation. As the team processed this revelation, Bob finally fixed the archive's communication system. It immediately played another message from the human fleet. P.S. We also brought graduation presents. Anyone want a moon 6 months after the humans' return? The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Great Galactic Council Chamber had been renovated to include both a formal meeting area and what humans called a chill zone, complete with beanbag chairs, which the Hexapodians had declared the greatest invention in the history of sitting. Professor Raxel stood at his familiar podium in the Grand Academy, but this time his lecture was different. The holoscreen behind him showed actual footage of human activities, and his class was now packed with both students and visiting humans who occasionally raised their hands to correct historical inaccuracies with even more ridiculous true stories. And that's why he concluded, we now have an entire academic department dedicated to studying human memes. Though I must admit, we still haven't figured out why a small Earth amphibian on a unicycle is considered peak comedy. A human student in the back helpfully shouted, "Here come dat boy." The alien students responded with the now traditional, "Oh snap, what up?" The cultural exchange programs had led to some interesting developments. The Arcturians had become obsessed with human soap operas. The Zentorians had started a successful chain of Earth-style diners in the Orion Arm. And the traditionally serious Quaxian diplomats had discovered Twitter, leading to the first intergalactic flame war over whether pineapple belonged on pizza. In the council chamber's new casual section, Chancellor Nixari sat with Ambassador Lauren Parker, watching a feed of the latest diplomatic incident. "So you're telling me," Nixari said, her spots shifting to confused orange, "that after we spent 3 weeks negotiating that trade agreement, your representative approved it by sending a picture of a hand-drawn frog with the text 'Wednesday, my dudes'?" "It was Wednesday," Lauren shrugged, sipping her coffee. "The paperwork will catch up eventually." The galaxy was adapting to humanity's presence in unexpected ways. The galactic military had to revise their entire tactical handbook after humans introduced the concept of winging it to their strategic planning. The Science Council was still trying to process how humans had turned faster than light travel into an extreme sport, and the Cultural Heritage Committee had officially classified human dad jokes as a form of psychological warfare. But the biggest change came from the humans' graduation present to the galaxy. True to their word, they had brought a moon. Specifically, they had brought a moon-sized space station that they insisted on calling the Death Star 2, Electric Boogaloo. "It's not actually a weapon," Commander Stone had explained to the panicking military leadership. "It's a party venue/university/theme park. The laser dish is actually a movie projector. Movie nights are on Thursdays. We're starting with the classics." As Professor Raxel finished his lecture and headed to his office, he found Bob the EAT technician waiting for him. Somehow, Bob had ended up being appointed as the official translator of human internet culture to the galaxy, a job that seemed to primarily involve explaining why humans found pictures of cats with poor spelling so entertaining. Professor Bob said, his tentacles twitching nervously, "We might have a situation. You know how the humans have been teaching us about their culture?" "Yes." "Well, some of our people have started teaching them our old customs in return." I failed to see the problem. The humans found out about the ancient quantum breakdancing championship. Raxel froze. The one where dancers manipulate probability fields through synchronized movement. Yes. They're calling it Space TikTok. Before Raxel could process this information, every communication device in the galaxy chimed with a new announcement from the human fleet. "Yo, this is a public service announcement. We just found out you can dance with quantum mechanics. This is not a drill. We repeat, this is not a drill. Mandatory dance party at the Death Star 2 Electric Boogaloo this Saturday. Bring your graviton manipulators and your best moves. P.S. We're calling it Quantum Dance Revolution." Professor Raxel looked at Bob, then at the announcement, then at the steady stream of humans and aliens already heading toward the nearest transport stations, all of them practicing their probability-altering dance moves. "You know what he said finally? I think the galaxy is going to be just fine." "How can you be so sure?" Because Raxel smiled, pulling out a pair of what the humans called sunglasses. They may be chaotic, but there are kind of chaotic now. As if to prove his point, the stars above briefly rearranged themselves into a giant smiling face, followed by the text "First 100 dancers get free t-shirts." The galaxy would never be the same. And that was probably for the best. After all, as the humans like to say, normal is overrated. End of excerpts from the Galactic Guide to Understanding Humans, 47th edition, now with 100% more memes. Note the publisher would like to clarify that no quantum physics were harmed in the making of this document. The space squids, however, absolutely crushed it on the dance floor.